Good morning. Hi, this is Jody Kaus and Martin C. We're with Kansas State University, and we're going to do a really helpful session for you today on creating your own college financial plan. So I'm going to let Martin take it off and explain the importance of why this content can be really beneficial.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. And we know, of course, that you are in high school and maybe college seems like a little ways off, but we think now is the perfect time for you to start thinking about how you would pay for and attend college. And I just wanted to share a little bit with you. My name is Martin C. I'm the department chair of the Personal Financial Planning Program at Kansas State. And we would love to have the opportunity to, if you come to K-State, share more with you about financial planning. So one of the first questions that folks often ask is, what is personal financial planning overall? And I know in high school, maybe you haven't yet had to deal with a lot of the financial issues. You haven't had to deal with savings at the end of the day. Hopefully you've got mom and dad that are helping you out a little bit with your finances. But we want you to start thinking about this now. So personal financial planning really is helping you think about how you're going to spend your money to meet your goals. And that could be saving up for a summer trip. That could be saving up for a new iPad, whatever that might be. You've got to start being intentional about your planning. So for now, maybe that's how you save a little bit. It's how you budget. It's how you manage your cash flow. And over time, you'll start thinking at a higher level about, hey, maybe how do I grow money into the future with investments? And how do I start saving for the long term? I'll throw the big retirement word out there. I know that's probably not on the forefront of your mind now, but it's something that will be there. So why is financial planning important? Why do you need a college financial plan? And Jody, if you'd hit the next slide for me. So a plan is really, really important because a plan gives you power. A plan helps you understand what's actually going on and make conscious decisions about that. So when we talk about a plan, we talk about plan giving you the organization you need to have the confidence that you're making the right decision and know what's going on. And it also allows you to have personal accountability. If you've taken the time to lay out what it is that you want to do and how you want to do it, you're going to be much more likely to follow that plan, to make quality decisions over and over again, and then be able to understand if you've been able to follow your plan or if you've deviated. So Jody's going to spend most of her time talking about your college financial plan. But if you're interested in this, what can you do now? And at high schools across the state, there are amazing opportunities for you to engage in this content right now. A number of high schools have financial literacy classes, and these are really good classes to help you start to understand the fundamentals of the financial issues that you will interact with your entire life. Similarly, there are classes in accounting or business, which can help you start thinking about money and how it's used in the world. And of course, FACS classes and family resource management are great opportunities to understand how to manage resources in the home. There's also lots of opportunities for you to get engaged in student clubs. Two clubs that we often interact with and see students in are the BPA, Business Professionals of America, and FBLA, the Future Business Leaders of America. These are great opportunities for you to lean in now and start to understand how finances can impact your life. So let's say you come to K-State. What can you do here? And some of this translates whether you go to K-State or another university, but if you come to K-State, what you really want to do is early on meet with a peer financial counselor at PowerCat Financial. These are one-on-one sessions with low pressure. They want to help you understand what's going on in your financial scenario. You can do an overview early, and then when you have real questions, you can come in and get those answered. But the more you reach out for help and maybe one day become a counselor, the better you will be in college. The other thing that we offer is PFP 105, which is an introduction to personal financial planning that we think all students should take. This will be your first exposure to all of the things that you will have to interact with when you graduate from college, and will give you a grounding that you need to start to understand those. Also, if you're really into it, come major in financial planning. Kansas State, we have a #2 ranked financial planning program in the United States, and we're lucky to have quite a number of scholarships that are meant to support and attract students like you who are interested in careers in personal financial planning. If you have careers elsewhere, There's also opportunities to do minors in financial planning, a minor in financial counseling, or with a Kansas insurance certificate. And we think these will round out any major that will help you be better prepared once you enter the real world to understand what's going on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jody, who will talk to you about your college financial plan.
Thank you, Martin. So the practical nuts and bolts of, the big picture, what is looking the financial picture of college for you? And it is unique to every individual. Everyone's path and the way that they are going to be paying for their college degree is going to be a little bit different. And so Martin kind of explained why the financial planning process is important, and it's no different than college. It is going to be one of the largest investments perhaps that you make in your lifetime. So you need to have a plan. You can't just shoot from the hip and hope it all works out. The more you can kind of look through all the different options that are available to you, the better outcome you'll likely have. So a great resource for you to kind of think through that process is our PowerCat Financial website, ksu.edu/PowerCatFinancial. We have a section called Your College Financial Plan, and here it just outlines what that step-by-step process would be. Starting first with determining what is the cost of the degree that you're seeking or the institution that you're planning to attend, and then looking at the better ways to cover those costs. So the free money, the scholarships and the grants, and perhaps some part-time work. A lot of students will work throughout their college time, and so making sure that a good balance of that is included in the analysis. And then lastly, if you do have to borrow any student loans, what are the better types of loans and how much should you borrow? And looking ahead to sort of the end, what is the repayment going to look like for you early on, instead of waiting till that point and realizing, eek, I'm really in over my head with my borrowing. And then reviewing that occasionally. At PowerCat Financial, we really recommend that students come in early, come in before that freshman year, create that plan, and then come in at least once a semester. So much like you meet with your academic advisor each semester to review your academic plan, you could be meeting with your financial counselor or advisor to review your financial plan. And then likely at the end of college, when you get that degree, you'll have much less financial stress because you'll know right where you stand with all of those financial decisions. So let's just start in and look at that first step. So determining what the cost of college is going to be is something that's really important, especially right now. There are some changes that are happening with regard to decisions around paying for school and what those costs are going to look like. So cost of attendance is sort of a term of art. It is your university's financial aid figure that the college has determined you can receive aid up to cover. So it includes lots of different pieces of the financial picture, and we'll go over those here in a minute. But it doesn't always include all of the out-of-pocket expenses that you might have for yourself. So that's why we do recommend that in addition to looking at the university cost of attendance for going to school, that you then think about your own personal budget and things that you have to pay for yourself that are above and beyond college expenses. And then unfortunately, these costs are probably going to be increasing. They have traditionally in the past, so you want to make sure that you factor in that increase as well in that analysis. So let's think about what cost of attendance includes. So obviously it's going to include your tuition, the cost of paying for those courses, and the fees that may be associated with any of those courses. But it also can include your room and your board. So either your dorm fee and your meal plan, or if you live off campus, then your rent and your utilities and your food up to a certain amount. So the universities usually do a survey of their students and ask them how much they're paying for these items. So they know on average what it should cost you to basically be a student, live, sleep, breathe, eat, and be at that university. It can also include your books and supplies and some transportation. They know as a student you're probably going to go home once or twice a semester, so some transportation there. And then some miscellaneous expenses. So it can include a few other items like dependent care or study abroad costs, things that you may need to speak to the financial aid office about if you want those to be part of that total cost of attendance. But it does vary from college to college, but that information should be available through the financial aid page of the university, or once you're enrolled, it'll be in your student information system. Here's just a snapshot for an example. So this is this past year's cost of attendance for an undergraduate student at Kansas State University, enrolled in 15 credit hours. So we have tuition, either if you're in state or if you're out of state, but then it also can include that housing, the meal plan, books and supplies, and that miscellaneous. So a total of around $27,000 if you're an in-state student. So students will usually look at that number and big eyes and say, that's a big number, you know, how am I going to cover all of that? And feel like, gosh, there's just not much I can do about it, and stick your head in the sand. But that's really not what we recommend. You know, you do have control. As you look at these numbers, you can see that around 66% of that are things that you have control over. So decisions that you make about your housing arrangements, you know, what kind of meal plan you accept, or what your costs are going to be for food. And then whether you buy those brand new books from the bookstore, or whether you do a little bit of comparison shopping and maybe look for online resources, or see if there are other means like renting your books. So you can have some measure of control over hopefully keeping that number in a reasonable amount for yourself. So keep in mind that that is the total dollar amount, though, that you can receive financial aid towards. So you can't borrow loans up and above full cost of attendance. One tool that I really like to recommend for students is a new tool here in the state of Kansas for analyzing all of the different Regent institutions and their various programs and the costs associated with achieving degrees in those programs. And then on the other hand, what some potential salary information is. Now, this isn't the end all and be all. You know, some of the data needs to be looked at with a kind of a grain of salt as far as how much of this can be accurate or what can be applied to your specific profession, but it is a good starting point, and it helps you at least ask those questions about what is the cost. So let's just take an example here. So if you use that tool and looked up Emporia State University's accounting degree, for example, you can see here what the total estimated cost over 4 years is, around $60,000 to get that degree. And then they have some wage information about what a starting accountant on average may earn. So you can kind of make sure and compare that investment in achieving that potential salary. Now, keep in mind that salary is going to be over a lifetime. And so, you know, getting that degree is still going to be a very good investment. Your earning potential is going to be much more over your lifetime with that degree than without. So, but looking at the numbers can be really helpful, and you can kind of do some comparing between the different institutions and the different programs that you might be considering. I did mention that factoring in the cost of attendance, on average over a long period of time, usually around a 3% increase is something that you might anticipate with that each year with a degree. But right now, at least in K-State, we're going to hold those costs steady this coming year, so that is really good news for everyone. Some other tool that you may look for, which will be embedded within the financial aid page of the university, is something called our net price calculator. So a gross price is a price before any reductions. So the full cost of tuition at that university would be the gross price. But traditionally, university is going to offer some scholarship aid or some grant aid. And so after that is applied, then you really get to the net price of that university. And you can look at what that looks like for each university through that calculator. You'll log in, you'll put in some financial information about you and your family, and then it will also show you approximately what that gift aid, so grants or scholarship, would be, and so what your net price is. So you can really compare apples to apples. You know, one university may look like it's much more expensive, but they may offer quite a bit in gift aid to their students, and so then the net price can become much more manageable and maybe more comparable to a university that you had thought would be more reasonable to attend. So that's another great tool as you start looking ahead to your college costs. I did mention that you want to do that personal budget, because that really gets you to drill down into any of the out-of-pocket expenses that you may incur just along the way. We have a helpful worksheet tool on our PowerCat Financial website. If you don't have one that you'd like to use, you can just download it right from the website to your computer and use it to create your own personal budget for semester or for the month or calendar academic year. It's a 3-step process. We do recommend you just sort of think off the top of your head what you spend your money on or what you will as a student. But then you need to track it. So looking ahead, you might keep receipts or look at your bank statement and enter what you actually spent over a month. And then look ahead to the next month and make adjustments off of all of that helpful information that you've assessed. You know, finances is not always about the numbers of 1 + 1 = 2, but it's really about the behavior of what you're doing and creating some habits for yourself around what you'd like to do with your money. So this can really help you drill in and really have those aha moments about, well, I thought it would be about $50 a month for my gas, but you know, I realize I'm spending more like $100 each month. So I really need to make some adjustments in my strategy around that expense. So that's where budgeting can really help you drill in to some of that and look at some of those other expenses that maybe you hadn't thought about, like getting haircuts, which right now in all this time, we're really wanting to get those haircuts. And that, of course, is something we should budget for looking ahead. Also entertainment, you know, you probably want to go out with your friends or go to some sporting events at the university or to the movies. So hopefully that's something we can all look ahead to be able to participate in and include in our budget plan as well. So that's a really great starting point. But then you need to look at the other side of the equation. So in addition to the expenses, you're going to have various resources to apply towards those expenses. And we have another comprehensive tool on our website, which is our college financial planning worksheet. It does start with that budget process, but then it goes to a second tab where then you can apply some of those resources that you're going to have available to you to those total expenses to try to get the number down to see where you really have either unmet need, but you might have to consider borrowing a student loan to cover, or if you maybe want to adjust your work hours and maybe work just a bit more or work over the summer to earn some more income to apply towards your semester expenses. So this is a really comprehensive tool that can look at everything combined. I really recommend that you use that as a big picture. Look at everything that you're doing with regard to the finances. So one of the things we always ask students is, you know, what is that number one budget breaker that we see a lot of times being the concern for students? And even though tuition may be the largest number, some of those smaller kind of spending leaks can really start to get out of hand with college. And so for students, we see the number one budget breaker being food. So typically, we just do a lot of education around that topic and give students other ideas and resources that they can use to manage that expense. So sometimes the food area of your budget might become also a social kind of piece of the puzzle. So you may be going out with friends and spending more money than you typically would, but you see that as a time to gather together, which is understandable. But maybe instead of eating out, you can share cooking at each other's place occasionally to get that same interaction, but not break the budget. And then also a lot of campuses now are offering some really wonderful resources like a food pantry. So we recommend that all students take advantage of that resource. You know, maybe this week you need to take some of those items from the food pantry, and then maybe next week you can donate some items. So it's just really something that we all benefit from, and we want to make sure students realize that those are really valuable ways to cut back on some of those expenses that can really overwhelm a student budget. There's lots of other ways to save money in college. You just need to kind of take advantage of being a student, looking for those student discounts. A lot of campuses provide a lot of great entertainment that's free to students to utilize through different programs on campus. Using sites like Chegg or Amazon to rent books. A lot of faculty are becoming a lot more, they're doing a lot better with providing those resources for students so you don't have to spend quite as much on your books. And so look for those, maybe wait and speak to your faculty member about exactly what's going to be required for the course. In fact, that just happened for me. I bought a book for my son for this summer course and realized it actually wasn't going to even be required, so it wasn't necessary. Probably can wait and make sure that you do need to buy those books first. Maybe split costs. There's other apps that you can use for discounts for food and things like that. And then also considering a little bit of work along the way. A lot of students find that once they get acclimated, having that part-time job can really give you a lot of wonderful connections to campus and kind of keep you focused on time management. I know my son, when he doesn't have a lot of things on the calendar, tends to procrastinate his studies and wait to the last minute, versus if he knows he has to work now, study next, he has a very good time management process, and it can actually make you more productive as long as it's in a good balance with each other. So after you've determined all of the costs for your university and your degree, then the next thing to think about is how you're going to cover those costs, starting with the best kinds of aid or funds first, which is the free money. So scholarships are wonderful things to be looking for and applying for. It can become like your part-time job. I know it takes a lot of time and energy, but once you get going with 1 or 2 applications, usually you can use those for future applications, modify them, and make them work for you. So look ahead to your university and making sure you know what their deadline is going to be with regard to scholarships, and applying by those times. And then reapplying each year, not just as an incoming freshman, but then as a sophomore, a junior, a senior, continuing to be in the application process for your university scholarships. But you can look out in the universe as well. So in addition to your university, you can go out in the universe and find all these other outside scholarships through either civic institutions, organizations and businesses, insurance companies that your family may be using, or your church, or also speaking through in the high school with your counselors. And they usually have a wonderful resource, a list of different scholarships you can continue to apply for. When you do that, we have some other search tools that you can look for to look for outside scholarships, like FastWeb, scholarships.com. With these search engines, the trick is really to put as much detail in the search tool so that it finds the best matches for you, and then just look at the details of each one to make sure that you fit the criteria and that you kind of cross all your T's and dot your I's and do exactly what the scholarship requires. So you might want to start creating that file of all the different applications and a checklist of what you need to do for each of the scholarships. Don't avoid the ones with the essays. I know that's a lot of a little extra work for you, but that makes it probably a little bit easier because a lot of students do skip over those, and so you may have a better opportunity to apply for the ones with the essay. Review, obviously, and proofread. And then also look at your social media accounts. Sometimes that's a place where individuals may be looking to get more information about you that you don't even know is happening. And so make sure that your social media accounts, your Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, are all professionally up to date as far as what you would like to be portrayed out into the public for yourself. So next, after you've looked for gift aid and scholarship aid, there are other types of aid that are similar, like grants, which is free money you do not have to pay back. But in order to receive those grants, you will likely have to complete what's called the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, form for that institution to then determine whether you're eligible for any of the grant aid. So each university has a priority date. That is not the deadline. It's the date that you'd like to make sure you get your FAFSA in by, because at that point they start reviewing those FAFSAs and they make aid packages and make that available to students. So the earlier you can get yours submitted by that date, the more likely you are to receive some types of aid that may be limited. But you technically have up until the end of the school year to complete a FAFSA. The deadline is not until the end of the academic year. So let's say you decide you're going to wait, you may not apply for the aid at the beginning and not complete the FAFSA, but midway through the school year you determine, oops, you do need some of that aid. You can go ahead and complete that FAFSA at that time, and just make sure you submit your school code in it, and then the school will receive that data and make a decision about any aid that it can offer you at that time. So the things that they may offer you, that free money, those grants, if you are eligible, usually those are need-based, so you have to show eligibility on the grant. They may offer you, there's a question, do you want to be considered eligible for work studies? So you check yes to that question, and then they may offer you work study, which is not aid that you receive up front like all the other types of aid. It's aid that you earn through a paycheck. You actually have to find an on-campus job. And then you notify the financial aid, the office, that you have secured your job, and you and your employer fill out a form, submit it to financial aid, and then part of that work study aid gets paid through your paycheck that you would earn through a typical job. If you don't receive work-study eligibility, which is need-based, you still can get that on-campus job at your university. It's just that you may not have as great of a chance if some departments will only hire students that have work-study. And then lastly, they're going to offer you some different types of student loans. And you'll want to make sure that you do that budget and determine how much you need to borrow. Whatever they offer you in student loans, you do not have to accept all of that aid. You determine how much of it you actually need to borrow. There are different types of student loans that they might offer you. The best type, which is going to be need-based, is called the subsidized loan. The subsidized and the unsubsidized undergraduate loans have the same exact interest rate, but they begin at different times. The subsidized loan interest rate does not begin until after you graduate and are at the end of your grace period, but the unsubsidized loan, the interest begins immediately as soon as you take the money. So again, that subsidized loan is need-based. You have to have sufficient need on the Fafsa to receive that, but the unsubsidized is not. So you could be a millionaire, fill out the Fafsa, and you would receive some type of aid, and it would most likely be the unsubsidized loan. So when you hear people say, I'm not going to do the Fafsa, I'm not going to complete it because I won't receive anything, that's really not accurate, because everyone would receive something. It just may not be the best types of aid. They may mean, I'm not going to receive the good types of aid like the subsidized loans or the grants, but everyone would receive some amount of an unsubsidized loan, okay? So we touched on all of these just briefly. There are other institutional grants. There are some state grants that your state may offer, and I put a link here to the Kansas region page, which can explain some of the Kansas grants. And then there's that work-study eligibility, and then a little bit more about that FAFSA. Just remember that it's an equation of what the cost of attendance of that university is, which is something we discussed earlier. And then they subtract from that your expected family contribution, or EFC amount, which is a combination of your parents' financial information and your personal financial information. And whatever is left is considered the unmet need or the financial need of the student. There's a great tool called the Fafsa Forecaster at fafsaforecaster.ed.gov, and you can play with that, put in some financial information, and see what it generates for you as far as the typical kind of aid, and that could be a helpful tool for you. For K-State, for everyone, the application of the FAFSA becomes available on October 1st for the next year. At K-State, our priority date is December 1. So we would like our students to try to get that FAFSA completed for next year by December 1 of this year. The FAFSA is based off of 2-year prior financial information. So your tax return from 2 years ago is going to be what you use on your FAFSA. So especially right now with the employment and financial environment that we're in currently, the Financial Aid Office has realized there's going to be a lot of difference between what you or family may have earned 2 years ago and the current academic year that you're applying for. So in that case, you will have to file what's called a professional judgment appeal, or kind of an explanation that you submit to the Financial Aid Office of why your financial picture has changed. Perhaps there's been a loss of income, employment status, a parent has lost a job, or you've lost a job. Maybe there's been additional medical expenses that were not covered by insurance. So it does have to be something substantial, but we anticipate, or the Financial Aid Office anticipates, there's going to be quite a bit more of these financial professional judgment appeals submitted this coming year because of all of the changes in the economy right now. So just know that that is an option that you can take with regard to your FAFSA information. A question that we get a lot of times from students is, why do I have to provide my parents' financial information on the FAFSA? They're not paying for anything regarding my college degree. I'm on my own with that. I'm paying for my own expenses. Well, unfortunately, in the United States higher education system, the way it works is it is anticipated that families will assist their student in achieving at least a bachelor's degree, and so it is required to provide that parent financial information unless you can answer yes to one of 12 questions on the FAFSA that deems that you're then considered to be independent. So those questions would be, are you married yourself as a student? Do you have a child of your own? As a student, are you age 24 or older? Are you seeking a graduate degree? So most undergraduate students cannot answer yes to those questions, typical undergrad students, so they will be considered dependent. And the dependency has nothing to do with your tax return. So whether your parents claim you on their income tax return has no impact on whether you're considered dependent or independent on the FAFSA. That's another question that's often asked. It's really based on whether you can answer yes to these 12 questions. Alrighty, so once your FAFSA is submitted, then they may offer you some of those types of aid we mentioned before. A few things regarding loans. We talked a little bit about the different types, the subsidized and the unsubsidized. If you fill out the FAFSA, you're going to be seeking those federal government loans. So the government is considered the lender, but they're going to assign it to a company to service, which is an important partner that you need to make sure you connect with. That's who you will make payments back to when you go into repayment. Each of the loans are going to have a set interest rate, and actually looking ahead, I'll talk a little bit next about what those rates are. But they're fixed rates for the life of the loan until they're paid off. You'll also have a grace period. So during school, you will not be required to make payments on these loans. They will be deferred while you're at least a half-time enrolled student, but you'll have a 6-month grace period after you graduate before you go into repayment. These loans do not require a cosigner if they are federal loans, but private loans may, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And all of the student loans that you do borrow will be on your credit report. So you do begin kind of creating a credit history and having a credit score. They are not helping or hurting your credit until you go into repayment. At that point, it will be very, very important to manage it well because it can impact your credit and your credit score. So let's look at the federal student loans. I mentioned that they have a fixed rate. The good news is that interest rate is actually going to be going down this next year. They just published that recently. This last year it was at a 4.5% rate, but the undergraduate subsidized and unsubsidized loans are going to be at 2.75% this next year. And then if you borrowed the following year, it would be at a different rate, whatever the market has, market adjustments have been in interest rates at that point. So there also is going to be another type of loan that they may offer you. There are caps on how much they can offer a student in loans, and I'll show you what that cap is in a sec. But the way that they cover your full cost of attendance then is to offer a larger type of loan called a Parent Plus loan if you're an undergraduate student. And it truly is the parent's loan. The parent has to accept that loan. There's a small credit check for the parent to be eligible to receive a loan. It is going to be on the parent's social security number and on their credit report. It cannot later be transferred to the student. It's always going to be the parent's loan. Some families, the parent may borrow the loan but tell their student, I'm expecting you to pay it back. That is fine, but if the student misses a payment or doesn't make a payment, then it affects the parent because it's still the parent's loan. So again, the interest rate is going to be going down, but it is one of the highest interest rate loans. So it's like the loan of last resort. You don't want to have to borrow that unless you need it. It was 7.08% this last year, and then this coming year is going to be 5.3%. It is different than a student loan also in that a student loan is automatically deferred while you're in school. A Parent Plus loan, you actually have to apply for it to be deferred. So the parent would have to ask for it to be deferred. Otherwise, it will go into repayment immediately for the student. So here is a chart showing what those caps are on how much the student can be offered in the student loans. It depends on how many credit hours you are at. So a traditional freshman or a student under 30 credit hours can only receive up to $5,500 in student loan amount. And so then the larger loan is going to be offered to them in a Parent Plus loan. And then as you see, as a student has more credit hours, that does rise slightly, but it's not near enough to cover the entire cost of attendance. So that's why we have two different types, and a larger, typically larger Parent Plus loan is going to be part of the financial aid package. Now, as a graduate student or a professional student, those caps do rise as noted here on that chart. And some students then ask, why why can't I just go out and get a private loan through a bank or a lending institution? And you can, that's certainly something that's available. And it may be because of the interest rate decision that you're looking at, but that's not the only factor to consider, is whether the interest rate on a private loan is going to be better than what the federal loans offer you. We typically recommend you do start with the federal loans and go through the Fafsa application process and determine what you're offered first, look over those options, and then decide whether or not you want to consider or compare it to a private loan. Federal loans have safety nets. So they have income-driven repayment options. They have loan forgiveness programs. So those are things that the private loans are not going to offer you. So that's why we say begin with the federal loans first and see if there's better options for you to consider. Also, a private loan is typically going to require a cosigner. They are going to be credit-based loans. So your interest rate on that private loan is going to be based on either your credit history, and typically if you don't have much as a student, you're going to need a cosigner, and it's going to be based off of their credit history. So it may or may not be a better interest rate than what the federal loans offer you. It just depends on the credit of the applicants or co-applicants on that private loan. Now, as an institution of higher ed, we cannot suggest a private lender to use. So what K-State offers is a tool called Fast Choice, and it is a really great way to compare different private loan options that are available. So let me give you a little quick idea. So if you use the Fast Choice tool and you looked at different lenders, you might find a dozen or so options. And if you wanted to compare a couple, so for example, Discover against Sallie Mae, you can look at those together. You can see the range of interest rates is pretty wide. So anything from perhaps a 6.5 up to a 12% rate. If your credit is good or excellent, you're going to get that lower interest rate. And if you or your co-applicant's credit is poor, you're going to get that higher interest rate. So it is credit-based, and the details there are things to look for, like their fees, their repayment plans or options available to you. Some of these private loans will let you drop your cosigner after making a year or so of on-time payments. So there's some other benefits that you can look at that are listed on that tool. And you would have to apply for those separately through those lenders. And then those loans do have to still be certified. So the financial aid office at the institution still has to indicate that you had unmet need, so cost of attendance that you didn't have covered yet from other types of aid, that you could still borrow these private loans to apply towards, okay? So some of those things are things that you might be thinking about, and just wanted to give you a little bit of overview, but there's a lot more information available on our website as well. This is another tool that you might want to start thinking about early. Looking ahead, I mentioned at the final picture of when you graduate and you're thinking of going into that career and you're going to start making that additional salary. What is your net take-home pay going to be, or your after-tax kind of paycheck that you're going to be living on? And then how much of that's going to be needed to apply towards repaying your student loan debt? And then looking at what you have left to cover the rest of your monthly expenses. So just making sure that it's going to work for you, the amount of potential salary, along with the amount of borrowing that you have to incur, and that the financial picture is something that you can manage. I think that's a really helpful process to go through early, something that we do at PowerCat Financial with students all of the time. So that's another tool you can download from our website. The financial aid process at K-State, I wanted to just touch on that real quickly in case you are thinking about attending K-State. There's a couple of things you'll need to make sure you do on time is to apply by the December 1st priority date. I've given you some links here on how to do that. Then you would be able to go in and review any scholarships or awards that you might be offered through the institution, but you can also complete the FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. I've put our school code up here. At K-State, we would like you to try to get that in by December 1st, the priority date. But remember, you have until the rest of the year to get that completed. And then you also want to go into the K-State Scholarship Network to look for other K-State scholarships and apply by the February 15th deadline, and do that every single year. So those are important steps and processes to do with regard to K-State's process. Something we always remind students is to be checking their K-State email. Very important information gets sent there either through faculty or also through financial aid and other offices. In your student information system for once you're enrolled at K-State, you'll have an information system where you go to register for courses and to pay your bill. And then there's a section called your tasks. And those are things that you need to get done for different areas. So there may be a task to complete entrance counseling for your student loans, or a task to submit your final high school transcript. Things like that have to get done for the process to continue to move along for you to be able to enroll on time. You also may be selected for what's called verifications. So about a third of our Fafsa applications do get selected for this verification process, which is like an audit where you have to submit more confirming information about the data that you've put into your Fafsa. So that would be something that would be put on your tasks as well. And then you would have to go into your cases and accept that financial aid that they've offered to you. And again, remember, you can change the amount on those student loans. If you do not want to borrow all of the amount they offered you, you can adjust that amount at that time. The financial aid office is a really important place for you to check in if you have any questions. ksu.edu/SFA is our link to our financial aid website. There are other websites that are available. This is a really helpful one that Wichita State has offered called My College Money Plan. And it goes through the same process that I've talked to you about today, but it's a website where you can actually type in some financial information, like the cost of the institution you're looking at, the saving that you may have already put aside for college, any of the scholarships that you've been able to seek, and then any financial aid that you're considering. And it can kind of help you look over that together with your family. Perhaps you want to sit down with your parents and go through this tool together, and just make sure you are all on the same page with regard to these important financial decisions. So I really like that website. And then last, of course, our website I mentioned before, and it's available to anyone, even if you're not going to attend K-State. We have lots of great financial tools there that you can utilize, and some of those worksheets that I mentioned previously, like the budget worksheet or the college financial plan worksheet. So take a look at that. If you are attending K-State, you can certainly request a session with us. We are offering our sessions online via Zoom or also phone sessions. And we'd be happy to go through some of this process with you. Once you get to the university, our office is actually located in the Student Union. It's up on the 3rd floor. It's a little secret, a hard to find location. The Union has a 3rd floor on the east side only, and that's where PowerCap Financial is situated. And it's a wonderful peer-to-peer program where students that are in our financial planning degree and our other financial degrees are then trained to provide all of this helpful advice to fellow students. So it's a really great way for you to get that help and meet with a peer like yourself that has kind of gone through some of these exact kinds of issues in themselves. So with that, I wanted to just thank you for meeting with us and looking over this financial information. I hope it was helpful to you as you think ahead to what college looks like and your financial goals and how you'd like to achieve your college degree, and let you know that we have a lot of great resources and academic programs that can be aligned with some of this if you're really interested in finances. So any final words from you, Dr. C?
I think that's great. Thanks, Jody, and students. You know, if something wasn't clear, feel free to reach out. We'd be glad to answer emails and help in any way possible. But Jody, that's all from me.
All right. Thank you very much.